Aloha, everyone. Mahalo for being patient with us, and we just wanted to welcome you guys, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Sinensi. And we aren't going to present our full presentation today. I think it would exhaust you guys at this point. But it was an interesting discussion listening to what the first agenda item. So the presentation is really about a 45-minute presentation. So we're going to just present the first 15 minutes of it and come back hopefully and present the rest. So actually our partners, Imogen and Geeta, will not be really part of the presentation because they're the kind of the meat of it when we get to the next part. But we did want to introduce them. It is 9 p.m. their time now, even though it looks like Geeta is pretending to be at the Grand Wailea. So I just want to just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So let's start with Dr. Geeta Swami from Connecticut/Grand Wailea.
Thank you. I'm pretending I'm in Hawaii. We just had one of the biggest nor'easters of the season and dumped about a couple of feet of snow. So I can just hope I was in Hawaii. That's the best I can do right now. But my name is Geeta Swami. It's Geetanjali is a full name if anyone wants to attempt it. I am founder and managing director at IoTask, which is an innovation consulting company. And our clients include multiple large Fortune 500s and governments. It typically, my career has spanned technology, management consulting, and private capital, and I'm also representative to the United Nations Equals Coalition, and I work closely with UN agencies on ESG issues such as gender equity. So I'm really excited to bring the benefit of our organization's years of experience in coming up with innovative solutions to this particular context of water, and we've really had a wonderful time working with Shay and Ian and Imogen and taking this forward. So with I'm going to turn it over back to Shay and let Imogen introduce herself.
Go ahead, Imogen.
Hi, my name's Imogen Rose Smith. I am the co-founder of the Maui ESG project along with Ian and Shay. And I had the privilege of meeting with some of you, not just at our conference that happened a year ago, yesterday or today or the day before, which feels like many, many years ago by this point. But also when I came out to Maui in June before that, which also feels like a very, very, very long time ago. And it's actually, it's amazing to see how far we've come in that period of time. And I think, actually the discussion that you guys all just had is really illustrative of why the work that we've been doing is so important. So thank you for that, and thank you for supporting what we've done today. So I was a long-time journalist covering institutional asset management. Most recently, I was a fellow with the University of California overseeing their sustainability program for their $120 billion pension plan. And I'm an ESG consultant and advisor. Thank you, Shay.
Thanks, Imogen. Nicole, can you briefly introduce yourself also?
Aloha, my name is Nicole Inoinohara. I'm with Namoku Aupuni o Ko'olau Hui, and I was the project manager for our Ko'olau watershed project using with the CARES lens.
Thanks, Nicole. And Nicole's going to talk about that within our presentation. And then last but not least, Ian Shan-Hodges is going to scoot in here.
Hello, everybody. I won't take much of your time, but it's nice to see everybody on the screen. And I'll turn it back over to Shay.
All right. So we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen here. What happened here? Oh, sorry. Okay. Can everybody see this? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I see. Yes, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so yes, this is going to be the first part of our presentation of public-private ESG water system solutions for all stakeholders, and you've now met all of our partners. And so, as you folks should be pretty familiar now with the term ESG, or environmental, social, good corporate governance, and as Imogen stated, it seems more important now than ever to kind of bring this kind of investment into Maui. And going back to the fact that a year ago we were doing our summit, 1 year and 1 day, one of the comments that was made at the summit, I think it was actually at the first panel that Keani Rollins-Fernandez chaired or moderated, was that Hawaii has kind of been the pawn shop of the world for quite a long time. And so I think we all know that our economy has relied on investment capital, much of it coming from off-island, and unfortunately the majority of the profits and benefits also going off-island. And as your previous discussion pointed out, COVID is reminding us very strongly that we need a new economic future on Maui. But in order to get there, we need to design an appropriate investment model that does allow for outside investors, but ensures that the community is represented, respected, and valued. So more and more, particularly because of COVID, previously because of climate change, ESG is becoming prominent with investors, and it's, again, stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance standards, and it provides a means to hold investors accountable, and investors also want to be able to track and make sure that their investments do meet these standards when they make those investments. So they want to be accountable for the impact that their capital has on stakeholders. But just like anything else, just by putting the ESG investment name on it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an ESG investment. It can be misused, but if it's used appropriately, it can ensure that common purpose is not sacrificed to profit. So that's basically what we've been all about, is, helping the community to exercise its rights and responsibility, and insist that investors remain true to the ESG principles that they lay claim to. In order to do that, the community has to be a respected partner. At the same time, you still have to have an underlying business model that's robust and profitable. So our overall goal for this last year and a half has been to identify purpose-driven investors, bring them into the community, and with input from the community, identify potential investors. So going back again a year ago, as you may remember, funding for the first year of the project was provided through the administration. The mayor put a line item in the budget for us to do the ESG project. You folks approved it. It was to increase community understanding of ESG principles, institutional investment, and private equity, which are key to understanding that ecosystem. But we also wanted outside investors and ESG practitioners to understand us, to understand Hawaii and Maui, our local issues and needs, and our potential to actually be, as Geeta mentioned, an innovative model for community-driven ESG investment. And a big piece of that at the summit was starting to build those relationships. So we covered a whole bunch of different topics, but, and like I said, the private equity, the institutional investment, but we also had some specific working groups where we looked at particular issues that are very important to Maui, one of which, of course, is water and the public trust. So we had a water governance and finance working group. They discussed community-controlled water systems, models for impact financing, governance structures, and we got a lot of feedback from the community at the summit and after the summit. And here you can see some of the folks that we actually had a very big panel. There were more people than this. Geeta was on the panel, Linda Coy, Eva Blumenstein. You'll recognize some of the other folks here, and Ian Monroe, who's an investor, Sam McCoy, Alohalani. So out of all of that, we began working directly with IOTask, Geeta's company, to create this strategic assessment roadmap for the East Maui Waterland Ecosystem and Watershed, and we actually got additional funding for that from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy that was very interested in it. So we presented that to you folks in August, and of course one of the primary issues, of course, is that water is a public trust with dual objectives of protection and maximum reasonable beneficial use, and folks generally don't feel like those are being met right now. And although we were looking at EMI in particular, this is not particular to EMI. With the Wailuku water system, I'm not that familiar with the water systems in West Maui, but I do know that these general issues, especially for these plantation systems, are common to all of them. So stakeholders requiring significant changes to meet ESG participative governance issues, so environmental, social, economic. Water infrastructures are complex, non-standard, they're in disrepair, they're very old, obviously. And a lot of what they were built for is no longer relevant. At a meeting recently, Avery Chumbley made the point that when people asked him the condition of the system, he said, well, it's doing what it was built to do, which is to get as much water as possible and get it down to the sugarcane fields. Well, that's not exactly what people want it to be doing anymore, right? There's a lack of transparency about conditions. There are various legal restrictions, varied ownerships, and the various legal, structural, and economic hurdles that we're dealing with often create a gridlock currently. So, things happen, things change and move. You get IFF standards, various things, but it's still not doing what we want it to be doing. So we have a unique opportunity today to envision a new future for our private plantation water systems, and it's very important that we do so. With so many residents dependent upon stream water and shifting weather patterns, it's time to use traditional knowledge, new technology, and new economic models to create a just and common sense restructuring to manage the Maui watershed lands for Maui's long-term vision. We absolutely believe there's going to be a lot more funding available in this coming year, not just COVID-19 stimulus funding. There is going to be infrastructure funding, renewable energy funding. I think somebody mentioned USDA funding in the earlier agenda item. So there's going to be opportunities for us to really do innovative things with these water systems, but we need to start now to be able to access those later. We need to create those plans now. And this photo, Nicole's going to speak in just a second, but this is from the CARES funding that they received to start doing some of this work. And just this is a slide about the community stream monitoring where the Ko'olau folks got CARES funding, and they did a really great project. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Nicole speak, and she can explain a little bit more about how COVID funding has already been, or CARES funding has already been accessed to start this process. Nicole, are you ready?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Can you see my oops?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So our goal for our project was to make sure our streams were adequately maintained and flowing, as well as collecting accurate data. We were able to employ 12 of our community members to make up 2 different teams. We had 8 field technicians, 2 supervisors, a data coordinator, and a project manager. Some of the challenges we had were finding our old trails because it was so overgrown. So we had to do a lot of clearing and maybe making new trails to get to those different streams. Along the way, we were able to connect with make some really good relationships with some professionals. So we got to meet a technician with Seaworm, USGS, and UH Maui. We learned a lot from all of those professionals, and so we were able to start doing our own measuring to gather our data. One of our main tools that we had during the whole project was this app called Aina Nerds. And this app is somewhere where we stored all of our data. We were able to pinpoint our location and take pictures of that area and that location, add it to that point. We were and also able to put descriptions in that area to show what we saw in that area. After inputting all of our data, these are some of the these are some of the things that app was able to put out for us. So this is one of our volume measurements for our stream, and then we are also able to get our water quality data all in this one app. Okay, that was about it.
Nicole can say a lot more, but we wanted to keep it sort of brief. So if you guys have questions later, she can tell you more. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here and just kind of pull this together a little bit. If you folks remember, and I know Gabe wasn't there, but oh, sorry, I don't have it on the thing. Sorry. Okay, sorry. So when we presented you folks the roadmap back in August, we gave you 1 year, 2 year, 3, 4, 5, and 10-year sort of steps we could take to get to our final place, which I'll show you in a minute. What's amazing is if you look at this as the 1 year priorities, this technology work stream, the folks in Ko'olau actually have been doing it. Not 20% of the streams and not 50 to 100 people, but all of these other aspects of it as far as crowd hydrology, working with a smart app to collect the data, establishing additional monitoring programs, surveying existing sustainable agriculture, food security. All of this has begun, and they actually did it in a 2-month period. And again, because of the way the CARES funding worked, they had to move super quickly. And when I was sort of showing this to Auntie Mahealani last week, she said, are you a mind reader? Because we've created this in August. And I said, well, not me, Geeta, because she actually was the one who figured out all these steps over this period. And I said she figured it out from Connecticut. And I think what's amazing about it is because we had done all this research and talked to people in the community and worked on this roadmap, we came up with a plan that was doable, and the community was ready, and they went out there. And obviously that's the other key. As I said, if you can have the most amazing idea on paper, it's what happens when it goes out and you try to implement it. So that was just the technology. And again, we didn't have funding for this yet, so it just so happened that this CARES funding came along and that the community was ready to do it and get this started. There's obviously the legal and governance work stream, establishing a community engagement model and process, engaging with infrastructure advocacy groups under infrastructure, and then the economic work stream. So, these are still things that are in our plan that we want to work toward. And to remind you, this is what the sort of 10-year plan looks like, where you start the first year initiating watershed and community activities, community data technology, which we've begun. Then comes the system upgrades transition, governance control approaches, and in the end, having these new financially viable stewardship models. And again, Nicole's talking about East Maui. I know you folks are going to be looking at the Wailuku purchase. All of this can be implemented in any kind of water system, and this is how you marry the ESG principles of having a community-driven solution and community stewardship, meeting community needs, but also having a business model that's going to work. So going back again, technology, generational knowledge, infrastructure, legal governance, and economics are all needed to achieve a new vision for Maui water over the next 1 to 10 years. And this vision is a starting point to focus the community's collaborative discussions on how to develop an ESG investment plan that supports the future they wish for their communities and the county. And it isn't just that, oh, this is a plan that any community should be doing. I mean, they probably should, but we are uniquely qualified. We can roll out traditionally urban technologies in a rural setting because of our small size. We have all these closed grids, whether we're talking about Lanai, Molokai, Hana, even West Maui to an extent. And our characteristics and our progressive and cultural lifestyle and temperament, it all just kind of leads into this. And we have this opportunity right now. And this is just kind of what it would look like if we had this, technology, IoT system happening throughout our island, so this, and we presented this again last August, where you have the crowdsourcing, which we already have in East Maui, the crowd to cloud, using technology, and then of course using the ESG standards. And actually, this is where I was going to stop today because, of the time situation. But basically, going into the next steps is deploying capital to meet community needs, which is what we got funded for this current year, and basically talking about how do we actually move forward, develop opportunities for local control and direct benefit from productive assets, developing these opportunities for creating jobs, bringing in the investment, and building these actionable ESG models. So just want to stop it there for today and leave a little bit of time for questions and come back again.
Mahalo, Shay, and thank you for you guys' patience and for accommodating us with the shortened version. And we'll definitely have you guys come back on at a later time. But did we have any questions for our guests? We have a question from Member King.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you, Shay and et al., Gita and Emojin. Nice to meet you, Nicole. So my question, just kind of looking at the big picture, what type of investment are we looking for? And should we be focused on trying to get someone local to invest in it? Do we want somebody from outside of the county or even the state owning our water system? Just have those, so what are your thoughts on the level of investment we're looking for? Are we looking for one investor, many investors?
So Imogen or Gita, do you want to take that?
Sure, let me take the first pass at it. So the idea really, and this is something I really wish we could have gone through the whole presentation, but the idea is that we don't have we don't have someone from outside owning the water system, as you put it, but we take an innovative approach where the county and the community, together with potential outside investors, collaboratively own it. So we create a stakeholder-owned entity. And by creating stakeholder buy-in and stakeholder ownership, we're able to do a lot of things, ranging from, of course, making everyone a voice in the decision-making, something that's historically been a challenge, to ensuring better economic participation, to investing in technologies for the future. Now, assuming, and because this would be a public-private partnership, it would take the onus of bearing the financial burdens away from the county and more into the going concern that would hold these particular assets, or the rights to use these assets, actually, because it's a concession, and distributed back to the community and the county. So let's assume, hypothetically, and again, this is just a hypothetical here, you were to create an entity to essentially take over the running of the EMI and the Wailuku systems, as a hypothetical, then we're talking about that entity, not the government, that entity raising well in excess of $100 million, not just to do the repairs and the infrastructure, etc., but to invest in the future. But it can very easily be something that would be basically a very lucrative business and pay back to the stakeholders over time. Does that sort of answer the question? I don't know. Shay, Imogen, do you want to add anything?
What you're envisioning, is it sort of like a co-op? When I think of utility co-ops, I think of the KIUC. All of our utilities are owned by HECO except the one on Kauai. And then all the ratepayers are considered the owners. So, if there's money left over, they get a rebate. But I don't know that all the ratepayers have invested in it. So, just kind of wondering how that model fits together. If you've got a unique entity that's newly created, that's, local people and possibly mainland people or corporations, putting in $800 million, then you can't really make all the ratepayers the owners, I'm assuming, because the people who invested in it are going to want the profit. So how does that
Right.
work?
So that's why, as I said, it's stakeholder owned. The community is really more of a founder, if you will, if you think about it. So if you were going to do, a classical startup, they're the people who, initially start, and those are the founders. And then outside investors invest in it, and then there's dilution, that comes in.
Right.
But there's a very good precedent on this, and I think when we go over the slides the next time around, we can talk about it.
Okay, and then you see the example. And you see basically the scope of what we're looking at, something like around 800 million.
No, I said over 100 million, probably 150,
over
200.
100.
Yeah, I would say 200 million is probably a good number. But then that would take multiple of these systems in and invest, not just invest in the infrastructure, but invest in things like, energy, etc. Solar, wind, those kinds of projects, and together with agricultural use of the agricultural land, etc., and many more innovative manners, etc. So I think if you were to go all the way, but the good news about it is there is a compelling business model around it. And there is a way of essentially aligning all the stakeholder incentives. I mean, we'll talk about the case studies next time round, but there's a very good example of how the New Zealand government has done this with the Maori community and the dairy farms. And it's immensely profitable. It was done exactly like this as a public-private partnership. Today, it's doing a 250 million in revenues. It's extremely profitable and is returning back to the community, the Maori community. So and most importantly, by making the community a stakeholder, they're able to actually influence it using traditional mechanisms. So the idea is to use well-established practice that has been used in other places, use a combination of them to achieve the broader ESG goals.
I'm sorry, Geeta, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to tell Councilmember King, that's actually what the rest of our slideshow is specifically about, is to answer all of those questions. So we were trying to avoid, not because we don't want to talk about it, I guess because we thought you folks are tired and would rather hear it in the next meeting. But yeah.
Okay, well, that answers some of my questions because I've kind of got an idea of the scope of what you're looking at.
Well, and you folks should have the full PowerPoint. I believe it gets sent to you, so you can look at the rest of it too. I mean, obviously it's better when we're presenting it, but that should answer some of your questions too.
Okay.
And if I can just make one point on that as well, which is that the point of the structure in part and the point of having these ESG standards and these ESG goals is that then it should, in theory, matter less where the capital comes from and more that the capital is value aligned with the overall objectives of the community, and that going into this, they know, okay, this is, water is going to be returned to the stream. These other things are going to happen. This is going to be part of the business. And that it's sort of baked into the company DNA. So even if down the road, when let's say the initial investor decides to exit, that there's no way that, say, a private equity company could come in that is not value aligned and turn things around. So the idea is to sort of set the structure up in such a way that the incentives of the community, the incentives of the capital providers, and everyone's are aligned, so that the value is always maintained.
Okay, and then that results also in what they call patient money. So you're not bringing people on board who are looking for their $1 million return the next year. They're gonna see this through to the goals of the actual project.
Exactly. The caveat here is that, for this to work for commercial outside investors, and frankly, you want it to work for commercial outside investors because you want to raise, again, from the modeling that we've done, sort of each water project looks like you probably need, let's call it $75 million to do it. For it to work, the business has to work, right? There has to be an economic incentive. It doesn't have to be how can I make the most money out of this system possible? But the investor has to have some expectation that they're going to make some money. And they also, and again, we'll go into this in more detail later, and I promise Shay, I'll stop after this, that they have to know that the rules of the road aren't suddenly going to change on them. That when the capital goes in, 4 years, if they're going to be patient investors, then they don't want to know 5 years down the road, suddenly everything's going to be changed on me and the government's going to come in and mess stuff up, right? So that's why, again, you'll see in the presentation if we can come back and talk about this more, that it gets set up at the beginning, and importantly, and then I really will stop. These conversations happen with the community to establish what are these structures, what are these rules of the road, what are the things that the community is going to value. So, for example, if the community is going to value, lending to small farmers, how is that baked in? And then once that's set up, then you move to the next stage, which is capitalizing the vehicle.
Okay, so you can't just set it up so that another administration can come in 4 years later and change it all.
Exactly.
It's got to be set up.
Or on the other hand, that a different investor can't come in and change it all. Right? So you, to the extent that you can, you set this up so that it is a functioning entity going forward, which again is also why it has to ensure that it makes money to be profitable, so that the wheels continue to turn.
Okay, well, I could probably sit here and talk to you forever, but I'll yield my time because there's other people who want to ask questions. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you,
Member King. We want to get some questions from the other members. I see Member Polton had a question.
Thanks. I have two questions. The first one is when you said about the government's not gonna change, and Ms. Pahuko's testimony earlier, the mechanism by which United States claims Hawaii is one, joint resolution of Congress is in a treaty of annexation. And I guess the other one is about being divisive and listening to the community. There is a large segment of the population in Maui that does not trust 5G technologies and the Internet of Things. And if we just say that, it's only going to stay in the watershed, or it's not going to be used to track what brand of soda folks want, how do you ensure that this type of technology isn't going to be used in such a way, once you let it in and the network is there, diapers, condoms, whatever?
Okay, I think I can answer this. So and actually I know exactly what Kamalani was referring to in the TIG report, since I wrote it, but so there are a lot of issues related not just with the ownership of the water system and the land, and of course who is community, right? And then what does the community actually want? So and again, that would have been my 2 slides in from where we are now, but the very first step, and to me, in the secret sauce, there's the beginning and there's the end. There's the community engagement in the beginning, where the community has to determine what they want, and then you have the end, which is the transparency and auditing, so that everything that was decided and all the stuff that was done, it can be tracked so that we know that it's really happening the way it's supposed to be, right? So you have to have those both ends. But the first step, the absolute 100% first step, whether we're talking Wailuku, whether we're talking about EMI, whether we're talking about other systems, is the community engagement. And that is a huge part. I know Kelly talked about KIUC, and I know there's a big project that recently happened with AES and the solar over there. That community engagement piece, and I was talking to community liaison for AES the other day, they're also very interested in that piece, right? Everybody, even big corporations, want to get it right. I mean, to the extent that it, or some do. Because they're going to have to pay for it somewhere along the line, right? The community is going to come out and complain. It's Some are fine with it. Let the people complain, or we'll just throw money at this problem or that problem. But if they really want to be effective and they really do care about ESG, they want to get the community engagement right. And that is definitely hard. There's no question. So one of the things that we want to propose when we go through this is to have a very robust community engagement process that would start basically now, where, the Ko'olau folks, the Hamakolo folks, all, bring in all the people, go out to their communities and start saying, what do we want this system to do? What do we not want it to do? What kinds of innovation are we willing to have? What kind are we not willing to have? And then, of course, who is we, right? When we're talking about the community and the system serving the community, are we just talking about people who live along the system, people who are served by the system, the whole island? So that's a super important question that definitely is key to the whole process.
I have a couple of add-ons to that. And again, if we have time, Geeta can certainly speak to the technology and the governance side better than I can. But I think one of the key differences here, and this is really, really important to stress, is that the model that we're proposing doesn't consider community engagement or the community just to be kind of like an obligation that has to be got through, right? That you have to get enough buy-in to get your permits to be able to do what you want to do. Like, the model that we're proposing, sees value in the community engagement and values community knowledge. Like Geeta was referring to it sort of like a VC model where the communities are the founder. The capital that the community is bringing to the conversation is actually really important. So the community input, including the community concerns and the objections, are really important. In addition, by being an owner in the eventual entity, again, this isn't sort of a checkbox exercise or a tokenism exercise, right? The community has recourse. So in the event that the community says, you know what, we're really concerned about this technology, we don't want it monitoring everything we do, as an owner in the corporate entity and presumably a board member, that's something that the community can do something about. And it can seek to ensure that, the technology remains just monitoring the streams and it's not monitoring, what everyone's had for dinner or whatever it is. So there's actually, you're not powerless within the system, and there's a way to bring these grievances and bring these concerns to the corporate entity.
I think the one point I will make is that by becoming an owner, the community then takes on, they take on the responsibility of making that trade-off. This is where your own, your notion of how much you want to make, how much you want to get in terms of dividends, and trading that off with, no, wait, I don't want to do this, which is wrong. And, the idea is to use established means of influence, and that's, having shareholders is an established way of communicating. So we're trying to basically do something innovative, but do it using established, well-tried, demonstrated mechanisms that exist around the world. Public-private partnerships exist. They have been used for everything from the Indiana Toll Road onwards. Community-owned companies and cooperatives exist. They have been used for, everything from dairy farms to utilities. And corporations exist. Those corporate mechanisms exist. They're used for almost all business in the United States. So we're not using mechanisms that are new. We're doing things which are tried and true, but we're combining them to come up with an innovative solution that is customized for the Maui community.
Thank you, Chair. I'll yield to my colleagues.
Thank you, Mahalo, Member Paulton. We have a question from Member Rollins Fernandez.
Mahalo, Chair, and mahalo for the presentation, everyone. I look forward to seeing the second half of the presentation. And so what I'm hearing, and it's becoming more and more familiar, which is exciting and encouraging, is that shift that the community has now has the opportunity to make. The Molokai community just established a community co-op for energy co-op. And a lot of the co-op members have been so accustomed to having projects imposed upon us on the Molokai community that it's taken a little time, and some of the members haven't even realized that we're not playing defense with this project, with this co-op, that this co-op belongs to the community, and it's the community that controls the decisions. And for so long, this hasn't really been available to our community. And so I know that it will take some time to make that shift, which is, again, exciting, to empower our community to have that kind of confidence in themselves, to know that they will be the ones in control of decision making. Mahalo for proposing this model. I'm excited by it, and I look forward to the second half of the presentation.
Thank you, Council Member. And I did want to just mention that piece of making that transition is super important, and you can't just sort of say to people, okay, go, do it, not just because of the psychology, but going back to the different models we're talking about, there has to be an education component, which is part of what we've built into this, and actually part of what we're being funded for the rest of this year, is to continue to bring expertise in of the governance structures, financial structures, so that, because community, they have to feel confident too. They have to feel like they're not going to make some crazy mistake or whatever, that they know that this can work and these are the models. So it is exciting.
Mahalo, Member Rollins Fernandez.
Mahalo, Chair.
Committee Vice Chair Johnson, did you have any questions?
Thank you. I have a brief question, and it's probably because I'm a freshman council member. I don't know this. In one of your points in your presentation, Shay, you mentioned that the county could apply for state leases. Is that correct?
Yes, the county can apply. I don't remember mentioning that, but but they can apply for state leases. That was actually established last year by then State Senator Kai Kahele. But and again, we're going to present about this, but we would be, I guess I see now where I said that. Yeah, you're right. My husband confirmed it. Yeah, so you can, and actually, we'll talk about this in our next part of the presentation, but part of this whole thing is a transition of, the county purchasing it first, whether it's Wailuku or EMI, and then transitioning to the community-controlled entity and transferring those leases. But yes, my understanding is the county can apply for those leases.
Okay, I just saw your point there. I was really interested. I said, oh, okay. That's all my questions are. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mahalo, Committee Vice Chair Johnson. I see Member Molina still on, and I don't know, he's been having some connectivity issues, and I don't know if he had any questions.
Yeah, Chair, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, I'm not the voice from beyond, but I'm having some video issues here. So, but anyway, if you'll permit me, I just have a couple of quick questions for our panelists. First of all, thank you for the information and update. With regards to one of the slides that mentioned lack of transparency about conditions as well as legal restrictions and varied ownerships that need to be addressed, I guess maybe Shay, if you can clarify that for me, cite some specific examples.
Sure. We know with the EMI system, there's been a definite lack of transparency, and I'm not here as a member of the water board, so I kind of I'm not sure quite how to talk about it, but we also know with the Wailuku Water Company as well, and again, from the financial perspective, when we're talking about investment or how much to spend on a system, or what we want to do with the system, you can't really address that if you don't have an engineering assessment and information about the condition of the system. And of course, EMI is 75 miles long, so it's extremely complicated. I think Wailuku less so, but any kind of due diligence requires that kind of information. And the community definitely feels like they don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Good points to make. And my question for Ms. Swami or Ms. Rose Smith, I looked at the ESG site and looked at some other municipalities that have ESG. Is there any municipality or community that has something that Maui could be modeled off of?
It depends what you mean by that. As Gita was referencing earlier, what we're proposing Maui do is really building off a lot of different ideas that have been successful. So in that regards, we're taking models from numerous places, some of them in North America, some in other places around the world. There are states and municipalities within the US that have had a lot of success with ESG investment and ESG models. The sort of the best known one is the Washington DC water bond, where they issued a bond for, I think it's basically it was rainwater runoff and sanitation. And that was a pay for success bond. So there's something called social finance bonds that have been quite popular. The state of Massachusetts used them quite extensively with some success. So there definitely are states and municipalities that have really embraced sort of ESG as a financing mechanism. What they've sort of tended to find is that you don't need to overcomplicate these things. The tools that we already have, you don't need to you can create a green bond, and certainly many green bonds have been issued, but you don't need to create a special WYSI impact bond of specialness to achieve kind of what you already have in your state financing toolkits. But there are examples out there. But again, sort of Maui and Hawaii are in some ways uniquely positioned to bring a lot of this innovation and ingenuity together and sort of be a showcase for sort of the best in class that's out there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, my curiosity was being motivated as I looked at the Niskayuna, New York example. And so it's really neat how all of these various communities are using this process. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
I actually want to add one point to what Imogen's saying, is that one should distinguish between ESG as in tapping sources that are interested in making ESG investments, and ESG as in successfully creating models that deliver the kind of impact, ESG impact that you want. And I think what we're saying is, even by using existing mechanisms, we are able to deliver the impact. For instance, just by making all the community a stakeholder, making them a shareholder in the entity that is going to execute in this, we have essentially created economic participation, and we've created governance mechanisms. So we've actually achieved multiple ESG goals by structuring it right. So that's one component to it. And then the second component is, because one is able to achieve these ESG goals, we have a very good case for going out to investors that want and seek to implement ESG investments. Does that sort of clarify the point?
Yes, definitely it helps. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Follow Member Molina. Okay, it looks like we may be losing quorum at 5 o'clock, and I didn't want to keep members after 5. So we can table some of our discussion for our next time. We can meet with Shay and Ian, and when we can deliver the second half of your presentation. As Shay had mentioned, the county has supported the Ahupua'a Summit and ESG Investment Conference last year. So this information has grown to some of the work that IOTAS, the Ko'olau Watershed Project, and particularly in anticipation of the upcoming budget, potential water system acquisitions, and the water use development plan. These are just some of the issues that will be coming for us and coming in the APT committee. So we just kind of wanted to throw out the palu a little bit about looking down the line and recognizing some of the our stakeholders who have put in the work in presenting this information to us. So with that, members, I did want to mahalo Dr. Gita and Imogen for staying on late with us. We're early in in Hawaii, but we look forward to more meetings with you guys. Also, Shay and Ian Chan Hodges and Ms. Nicole Inouye Nohara. So again, mahalo for this presentation, and we'll reschedule you guys on the next committee meetings. For King.
Yeah, Chair, thank you for putting this together. I think it's really great that it's becoming more real and more important to people as this ESG idea focuses around our water systems. And I just wondered if is there another event coming up, Jay or Ian, as far as the ESG, that'll bring the community into focus around it? Because I think a lot of people were having a hard time, first of all, grasping the ESG concept, and then once they did, it was like, how does that matter to me? And now that we're talking specifically about the water systems, I think people can understand and be a little more engaged in it, because it is going to matter to all of us. But do we have another event?
Yeah, well, we can't do, oops, I don't know why I'm feedback, but we can't do another summit, obviously, anytime soon. But we do, as part of this this particular contract we have with the county, is we have something called Ahupua'a Summit 2.0, which has been a series of panels. We did one about private equity. Actually, Representative Tina Wildberger moderated that in November. And so we have more planned, and we can certainly do one specific about water. We were kind of waiting till we presented to you folks, but then, yeah, we definitely have it on our agenda to do about 3 or 4 more of these panels that I believe that we always invite you to, but I'll make sure you get the invitation. And we always
I think this virtual, it's a virtual as an opportunity, to bring a lot of people in from the greater Maui County to understand how this whole concept and the idea of looking for investors is linked into getting more local control of our water systems.
Well, and you're right. The Zoom panels actually, in some ways, reach more people. The panel we did in November with Representative Wildberger, we had maybe 50 people at the time, but then on Facebook it was about, I think, 300 or 400 people actually. I don't know if they watched the whole thing, but ultimately saw it. So that was a lot. And again, you're right. It is not easy to just grasp instantly the information. It's pretty complex, but once people get it, it's cool.
Okay. Well, it's a great discussion. Thank you, Chair, for putting this together.
Mahalo, Member King. It's a great beginning of discussion. Again, mahalo for joining us today, and see you guys next time. Mahalo for being on. Aloha.
Mahalo.
Okay, members, if there are no objections, the chair would like to defer item 51, water delivery system.
No